All right. Hi, everyone. I'm the Philosophy Bro. And today I'm going to do another Philosophy Bro book review, of course. And I'm the Critical Race Theorist, or CRT Philosophy Bro, for the purposes of this video, of course. I'm going to continue my series on the evil critical race theorist Derrick Bell's book called Silent Covenants. And this is about a few paragraphs in which he talks about, among other things, the fascinating fact that I learned from the book, which is that poor white farmers wanted slavery abolished, which is surprising because you would think they would want slavery to exist, but they wanted it abolished for economic reasons. They wanted slavery to be abolished because they thought that black slaves were taking their jobs that they would have gotten paid for, that the slaves were doing for free because they were slaves, which obviously is misinformed, and that's not how slavery works. And it's similar to the arguments of people who are anti-immigration talking about immigrants are taking people's jobs, even though they're not taking white people's jobs, generally speaking. Anyway, so this, like I said, this is from his Derrick Bell's book called Silent Covenants, and let's get into the clip here. All right, so abolition of slavery in the northern states. Lincoln's issuance of the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 and the divergent responses of blacks and whites to his action were foreshadowed by abolition policies in the northern states a half century earlier. So, approximately 1813 or something like that, right? So, a half century earlier. In the northern states, slavery was abolished by constitutional provision. See, I didn't know this either before the Civil War, that in northern states slavery was abolished, in several of them. In the northern states, slavery was abolished by constitutional provision in Vermont in 1777, Ohio in 1802, Illinois in 1818, and Indiana in 1816, by judicial decision in Massachusetts in 1783, by constitutional interpretation in New Hampshire in 1857, and by gradual abolition acts in Pennsylvania 1780, Rhode Island 1784, Connecticut 1784 and 1797, New York 1799 and 1827, and New Jersey in 1804. In varying degrees, abolition in the North was the result of several factors. Idealism stemming from the Revolution with its quote unquote rights of man ideology. So, um, this, well, if we're talking about, the original U.S. Constitution of the so-called founding fathers, or if you're talking about rights of man in that sense, this idea of all men being created equal, except for that only includes basically rich white men, no women, no black people, no poor people. Even poor white people had trouble voting, which we learned about from Derrick Bell in previous videos on this book, Silent Covenants. So check those out as well. But, it makes sense, and this sort of thing led to the civil rights movement like a century or so after the 1860s, right? Talking about how, that black people are just as equal as all other people, and women are too, but this is specifically about black people. So the rights of man should include all men, all people of all colors, which makes a lot of sense to me, probably makes a lot of sense to most people, right? So that's the rights of man ideology. The lesser dependence on the northern economy on a large labor force, right? Because if the um, if the northern economy doesn't rely on a large labor force at once, like they don't rely on slaves, then in theory that can create more jobs for poor white farmers that the slaves are going to be doing. So they want slavery to be abolished so they can get more jobs, so they can financially, because they financially benefit from slavery being abolished. That part is true. Like everyone, well, not everyone, the only people who were hurt, economically hurt by the end of slavery, were the tiny percentage of rich white slave owners, and most white people were poor white farmers who didn't actually own any slaves. But anyway, so that was so we were talking about the rights of man ideology. So, and then the lesser dependence of the northern economy on a large labor force, if we're talking about the abolition of slavery, economically benefiting poor white farmers, right? Okay, so the lesser dependence of the northern economy on a large labor force, the North's relatively small investment in slaves combined with a great I didn't know. I didn't know that. At this time at least, the North had a smaller investment in slavery, but that would make sense given the fact that he mentioned earlier that slavery was abolished in several northern states years and years before the American Civil War. But anyway, so the North's relatively small investment in slaves combined with the great hostility of the white laboring class to the competition of slaves, like I was talking about, right, which I thought was really interesting. The white working class people were opposed to slavery for somewhat nefarious, but also perhaps somewhat understandable reasons, not the likely racism which was connected to it, but if you're a poor white farmer and you're economically hurting from slavery because slaves are doing farm work that you want to do, and the slave owners are impinging on your own production of your crops that you're trying to grow as a farmer, then I can see how you could be concerned, economically speaking, about that, right? Okay, so great hostility of the white laboring class to the competition of slaves, the fear of slave revolts. See, slave revolts started to happen more and more frequently towards the end of abolition of slavery in the US. And so there was increasing realistic worry about the fear of slave revolts, which makes sense, right? And then slavery was abolished due to this, along with a variety of other factors, right? And he's mentioning a few other factors here as well. Not only the previous factors, including the fear of slave revolts, but also a general belief that there was no place for inferior blacks in the new societies. So this is kind of ironic and it's kind of twisted, like right for a twisted reason, right? A general belief that there was no place for quote unquote inferior blacks in the new societies. So it's kind of like gentrification of society in a way, so like cultural gentrification or something like that. So they don't want the inferior blacks to be in societies because the slaves are inferior blacks. So, this is what they're thinking. So they want to upgrade the black people to actual slaves and adhere to more realistically to the rights of man ideology, right? So that we can have the proper superior non-slave whites in our new superior societies. So like they want to, it was like an ironically racist reason for wanting to end slavery on the part of working class farmers in particular, right? Which I think is really interesting and fascinating, and I had no idea about that. All right, so yeah, this is yet another example about why I think that critical race theory is not just this evil philosophical gobbledygook. That's actually kind of ironically what people like James Lindsay, who I criticize all the time, are saying about it. That is what he is doing. That is philosophical gobbledygook. That is not evil, but dumb. All right, so yeah, like I always say, don't listen to people like James Lindsay about critical race theory. Read these books yourself. This one, Silent Covenant, in particular, by Derrick Bell, I think is very good. Even some of his books, I think, are not good. So there's a variation between even different books by the same authors. There's a lot of variation between different authors. Some authors are way worse, like even Kimberly Crenshaw, who James Lindsay mentioned, but he gets her wrong a lot. So yeah, read all these books. You can find at least some of them for free on archive.org. You can find Silent Covenants on there, and you can find a whole bunch of other ones, like James Lindsay's newest book, Race Marxism, which I've been reading and taking notes on to do a video about on oceanandpdf.com. So check that out too. And yeah, check out my previous videos in this playlist on this fascinating book and not evil at all book, and check out my future videos on it. And yeah, I think for the next one I'll do, oh yeah, the next one I'll release will be a clip, I believe, tomorrow from my uh, video about the post-structuralist philosopher Michel Foucault, who I like his book called The History of Sexuality, a clip from my previous book in that series on his interesting theory that he was putting forth, which is that during the Enlightenment, the sexual repression of society actually started with the rich and powerful elites, which I thought was fascinating too, because you would think it would start with the lower classes if you want to sexually repress society. So check out that clip coming out tomorrow as well, of course. And also, of course, like I always say, click that bell to be notified when I come out with new videos. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. A lot of people watch videos without subscribing. Smash the like button. Make sweet love to it. Molest it, elbow drop it, whatever you want to do, as long as you press it. Check out my Patreon link. The link is in the description of the video as always. And most importantly, always remember this: the funk cures all, and groove is in the heart. And read these books yourself instead of just taking on faith what dumbass public intellectuals strawman about it. All right, philosophy is awesome, and adios until next time, everyone.